Welcome back to part 2 of how to create a watch on Affinity Designer. If you haven't seen part 1, please look in the description and I'll add the link there. Thank you. At the top we have the watch we've just been making up here, and at the bottom we have the design I did of the Omega Seamaster. And I just wanted to show you this so that you can see that all these designs they're made up of different shapes, and it's what you do with those shapes that will give it the look that you want, whether it's minimalist like the top one or more detailed like the bottom one. As you can see, you've got the bezel, the halo there used with the donut tool. You've got the circular tool here, the ellipse tool, the rectangular tool up here, and we've messed around with the corner tool and the teeth option, like I said over here. It's the cog tool. These are the hands, seconds, hours, minutes, and the hour markers, etc. If I zoom in a little bit, we'll start with the pipette on the watch. You can see it's there. My design, it was a bit more detailed, and you can see it here in close-up. It's just exactly the same shapes played around with. So I'm going to go through some of these one by one in case you want to see how I made it more three-dimensional. And if you recall, I was saying about how I made the strap earlier and how I was placing each link within the strap. You can see here, here's the strap, this is the background. So I basically traced around a photo of the watch just to see if I could get, just the sides. All the blocks here would be within this shape, sort of nested within or just placed behind and broken down a little bit. You can see each link here. They're just rectangles with shapes inside them, Gaussian blur. I'll get more into that when I show you how I made those. But just like a breakdown of this design so it's more clear to you how I do it. It's better to think of it in stages and bite-sized chunks rather than feeling overwhelmed when you're making a design and thinking, how am I going to make this? All it is little shapes put together making a final piece, so to speak. Same thing here. I'll be going through each of these pieces and showing you how I did it. These are the lugs, and there's the teeth. If you look back to my watch here, so we had the teeth here, and then you can just about see the teeth that are in the shadows, and I've included that because here is the main teeth. Behind that I placed just a black version of it, so it looks a bit more three-dimensional, so you can see them kind of poking out from behind. Yep, the hands, just how we made the hands and the minutes and the hours, all that. Each of these I've also placed the center, rotation center here, just like I did with the simple ones. So all it is a shape, and you're just deciding where you're going to stick that center rotation. Okay, and three-dimensional 3 on R1. I just threw a flat one in there. I'll show you how to do that, and there you have it. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you one by one how all of these make the watch and just how to achieve that look. As you can see, there's less here because it's obviously less detailed. Let's get started. The pipette, that is this section here, and show you how we make it a bit more three-dimensional. And it's as simple as this. Go over here on your left, the donut tool, click on the screen anywhere, drag, press Shift and Command to keep it to keep it in a square shape. Okay, so we've got it here. Let's make this a little bit, there we go. So you've got the donut shape. Let's change it to grey. So let's change it to around there. Okay, next thing you want to do is go to the ellipse tool, go to the center, click and drag. So it goes over into the donut. Okay, and you can see it there. Let's change the color of that to, let's try an orangey color like that. Let's go down here. So here they are, the two. Let me stick these on top so it's a bit more obvious. Okay, so you want to drag the orange circle underneath, and let's try and start making this 3D. Let's go to this one here, and what we're going to do is go down to Effects, and we're going to go to 3D. Click on that and make sure that is highlighted. And here you can see the options. For the radius, you can play around with this as much as you want, but the radius will make it more round. If you have a certain profile in mind, like you'd want it to be, you know, have a bit more of a straight line around it or a bit more pointy, you can click on Profile and it gives you these options. So if I click this, you can see it's a bit more like a pyramid. These ones, and you can kind of tell how it works, but as this is kind of a rounded metal piece, I'm going to select this because it's more rounded. Also note you can play around with this to make any kind of shape you'd like, but we're going to keep it rounded. There we go, click on that, it's rounded. And we've got some other options here. I'll play with it and you can see what it's doing. Diffuses the light that's hitting it. But the first thing I like to do is go to direction, and that's the direction of light that's hitting it. If this, like say if a light source or the sun is coming from this direction, this is how it will hit it. This is what makes it more 3D to the eye. If I can leave that there, you can mess around with the shininess of it, so it could be really shiny. And specular. Okay, and ambient. It's like ambient light, I think. And you can change the actual color of the light through here. I'm just going to keep it white for now. You can also add more light sources. So there might be a source of light coming from another side. So we've got one coming down here. If I press Add, and I can move it from here, there's another source of light. So there'll be more surface that is reflecting light. I'll leave that as it is for now. So that is how to make that bit 3D. If you're not happy with that color, go up to Fill and you can play around with it from there. So this is a bit more like how my one was earlier. Let's change in here the pipette inside. If I zoom in, you can see there's a bit of shadowing around here. And also note there is a shadow underneath here. Maybe that's the way the light's hitting it, but all the details really add to the effect of realism if you're going for that. Let's click on the orange brownie circle and let's add, instead of making it one straight color, let's add a gradient. And so I've selected gradient here and I'm going to go to radial. And you see how now the light is, how it's going from light to dark here. This is kind of what we want. I can change the center to whichever color I wish. So I'll choose something a bit similar to what we had before. And then I will change the outside to a bit darker. And if you'd like to play around with the amount of light and dark here, it's sometimes useful to use the fill tool. Click that and you can see how it works. If you want it to be a little less kind of intense, just drag it to about here. And you can play around with the colors as much as you like. Let's add that shadow that's surrounding it. Another easy one to do. Simply go to the ellipse tool, go to the center of the image and draw a circle. Keeping hold of Shift and Command, let's make it come out a little bit like this. Let's make this black, so we won't go for the gradient, we'll just go for a solid color. So that's just black now, and let's make sure that's on the bottom layer. So there they are, those 3 layers there. Next thing we're going to want to do is give it a bit of a blur. Again, down to the Layer Effects panel, and Gaussian Blur is there. You can whack that up, as you can see in the background here. It's a bit more blurry. There you have it. Moving on, we're going to create the number 3, and we're going to make it 3-dimensional like it is here. Head over here to the left, Artistic Text tool. Choose a big size or a small size, up to you. You can change it through here. Okay, so we've got letter 3. Let's make it 3-dimensional. First of all, let's make it a little bigger. There we go. And same again from the last thing we made 3-dimensional. We press 3D again. And whilst I'm here, I will change the color of this. There we go. Make it a little bit more silvery, a little bit more chromy. Okay, we're heading back in. If you want to go back, like I've just done, you go and do something else and you want to go back to playing around with the 3D, you press on the layer effects here, because you've added it before. You just click on it and you can get straight back into manipulating it. We have, it's up to you how you do it. I can change the straight line profile, which is going to give it more of a sharper edge, like this. On my one, I've made it a little bit more rounded, as you can see, just a little bit more rounded on the sides. You can also do that, so we can head to here, make it slightly more rounded. We'll choose that profile. Then you just choose how much shine you want, how much you want it to reflect the light. Remember, you can play around with the light source, where it's coming from below, above. Quite important if you're going to be making a watch and you want to make it look realistic, or that you've made people know that you've paid attention to detail. Everything on the watch must be matching of where the light's coming from. Just remember that when you're making other elements and you're adding this directional light. So here we go. And there you have it. There is the 3-dimensional 3. You can see that there is some noise going on here. It gives it some texture. I've added that through Affinity Designer's own noise creator, so to speak. I'll show you how to make that now. And to give it a little bit more realism, I've made it slightly darker around the edges to where it dips down and the glass kind of gives it that shadow. I'll show you how to make that now. Another simple one. Again, go to the ellipse tool, click Shift and Command on a Mac. There you go, it's black circle. Okay, so we're going to want to choose fill, and we're going to go to gradient, and we are going to choose radial. So we don't want it to be that light in the middle. So we'll head over here. As you can see, this is the light part, and we're going to whack that to here. Now it still looks a little bit too harsh in the center there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this center divider and I'm going to push it out a little bit more so that it's just the edges that are at the darkest point. And now that I've done that, I can see it's still a little bit too light, so you can go over and make it a little bit darker still. Okay, that will do for now. So to give it that noise, you simply go over here to the color and you press switch and it changes it, the opacity. See that? We don't want to play around with that, but there's a little faint button there called switch. Click on that and it says noise. And you can see here it goes from smooth to more noisy. So I can just simply drag that out and there you have it. You've got that texture on the watch that you wanted. Maybe it's a bit too much. And there you go. That's how you make it. Making the minute, hour, and second hand. Let me go in and show you. So this is what they look like on the watch, and I've taken it off the watch and put it to the side so you can see what it's like and the way they are layered. As you can see, that's on the top layer, that's the middle, and that's the bottom. And you can also see there's a drop shadow there as well that I've added, and it's made in the same way these were made. If you remember from when we were making the other design of this more simpler watch. As you can see here, if I press on this as well, they move in the same way. How did I make this? Well, I'm going to break it down for you over here. So this is the hour hand. That is a shape I made purely through using the pen tool. I just went about and made a shape. Blah, blah, just going real quick. Bang, and I started making more detail to it as I went along. And obviously I was tracing over a photograph of the original watch, so I was just kind of like tracing like this around there. Anyway, let's get rid of that. So you can do that, make it whatever color you want. So I've made it gray, and then the next thing I did was to add a rectangle. I made a white rectangle and I placed it over it like this, and I nested this white rectangle into that arrow. So there's the white rectangle, there's the hand hour. I'll drag it down and right a little bit, and there it is, it's in there. I'll just make it a little bit more central. There, like this. So after I did that, I made this little arrow here, and I also nested that inside. So just like I showed you how to make the hour markers earlier, this is how I did it, and then I nested that within the hand hour again. And that's the main shape done, and then I also added the shadow because there's going to be light hitting the watch, and I did that. If you look over here, there is it's got a layer effect. So if you can see here, outer shadow, I just clicked outer shadow and then I just played around with it here. So this will give it more of a deep, darker shadow, and the radius is how far away, I suppose, from the surface it is. So as it's quite close, I just put a little bit on there, and offset how far away it is from the hard surface as well. So you could really you could make it sort of, if it was very close to the glass of the watch and really high up, it might look like this. You can play around with the angle, make it further away, but as you can see the way I did it before, that's how it works. And you can play around with the color of the shadow if you don't want it too harsh. So literally that's how I made all of these. One other thing that I did notice when I was creating the shadows, it worked well for the ones down here and in the middle, the second hand, the minutes hand, but when it came to the seconds hand, a little bit of shadow was cast on this hand, but then also it was, if you look over on the watch, So a little bit was cast on this minute hand, but then I also wanted to include a shadow on the watch face. Now, it's not going to look realistic if you create a shadow on the second hand, and I'll go ahead and show you now. Outer shadow, as you can see here. So if I zoom in a bit, it's not going to look too realistic because the shadow would be a bit further away, so it wouldn't be directly in line. Yeah, so to get rid of that, I copied the second hand. So I just Apple C, Apple V, or Command C, Command V, and so I've got it here. Let me go off of it. And I basically went to Effects and then Color Overlay just to make it black, just totally black. And then I added another effect, which was Gaussian Blur, and I just made it a bit blurry, like that. And then I placed it underneath that hand, that second hand. So there. So you could see that it's like maybe if it's a little bit further away, and if the shadow on this minute hand, it would be closer, it might be a little bit more. We'll go to the watch and show you. You can see it's a little bit closer there, but it's a little bit further away here. Not sure how well you can see on this computer screen, but yeah, something to consider when making shadows and thinking about realism. We're going to go into a little bit more detail now. This is the main area of the watch, where the teeth are and the halo with the donut tool. Remember, we made that. They're all different sections. So I'm going to show you the first section, which is the cog tool, which we made earlier. And on this one, which is taken directly from this watch, this one has a fill of a gradient. And before we just had it blank, but this time we have a gradient. So I've set the gradient to conical, and I've added different colors you can see here. I'm just going to press. I'm going to press on the fill tool so you can see how I've worked it out. When you press on the conical tool, if you don't want there to be any sort of sharp changes in color from this white to this white, I'll show you how it works. This white here is here, and this white here is here. Now, if you have different colors, they're going to clash, and you'll see a definite line there, like this. And you don't want that to happen. So what I always suggest, if you want a real smooth, circular, metallic look, is always make both sides white. So if I go in here, make them both white to begin with, and then start playing around with colors on the inside. So you can see here as it goes along, the next color is slightly more gray, which is here. Forget what you see in the background for now, it's just this gray color here. That is this, and you can see you can make it darker, lighter here. And I've just gone around this circle, and I've just put white, grey, make it a little bit darker, a little bit lighter. You can see where this one is very grey, that is this here. So it's cool that you can see it in this view and on the fill tool view. You can also play around with it from here to get the look that you want. So that's cool in adding to that sort of metallic look. And you might not see much of it because you only see this much of the cog here. All this section is the next bit I'm going to be talking about, but remember about the light source, where the light's coming from. You want to be careful that you do it justice from where the light would have come from, would it be a real watch. Let me go ahead and show you the next section that I did. This is getting in a little bit more detail now, but the things that I really think that have made it look a little bit more realistic, a lot less cartoony. You can see here on the teeth, there's just a little bit of a shine, like like there's a bit of a shadow and a bit of light here, and it just kind of adds to that sort of realist kind of effect. If I go and show you here, all I've done is nested a bunch of shapes. So you can see this little black bit here is just a shape I made through using the pen tool. And then if you look, this is the layer, I added an effects and just made Gaussian blur. You see that? It's just 0.2 pixels. Just a little bit there. And again here, you don't have to just do a full black shape. You can also add in gradients, because the light might hit it from one direction here, and then you might get shadow as it goes up the watch. So I made another shape again, and you can see up here on the fill, I've just made it go from kind of light grey to darker grey, and that's where you see it here. And also I added a on the last piece here, let's see where this one is, down here, again I just drew around kind of in between these cogs. I stuck a little Gaussian blur on there again, just so it blends in a little bit nicer, and I just nested it in this big cog shape we've got here. And it's sometimes, you know, it's the devil's in the detail. I love detail, so just a little bit. If you go in, you can see here there's just the light catching each little tooth, and so if I show you over here, all those lights are they're literally white blobs, and I've just applied a Gaussian blur to it again. There you go, a little bit more of a Gaussian blur, and that's all it is. And I just copied and pasted it on each one, not every single one, just a few, to give it that effect. What I added on top of that is the watch face, which I will turn on now in the layers panel. And here you can see on this one I've added fill again conical. You can see there's a bit more of a line here, definitive line. Doesn't seem to show up so much on here. I could change it, but unless you were going to zoom in this far, you wouldn't see that definite line. But like I was saying, it's always good to go for exactly the same color each side so you don't get this line. There it is. So this, again, like I showed you earlier, I used the donut tool, and I just made a simple black one earlier. No, it was white, wasn't it? This time I've just chosen a black color, and I've chosen to use conical again. The way the light hits it, I wanted it to be very flowy, from going lighter to darker to lighter. And you can see here what I've done, same as before. But also I added the 3D effect on it. So if I head down to where it says bezel shine, that layer there, I've made it 3D, and you can see, like when we used with the pipette, I've used this rounded profile, and I've played around with the radius, etc. You can see here, got a little bit of an edge here, and I've increased the shininess and specular so it looks a lot more realistic. You can see here, just as I play with it, what it does. Just one light source on this one from this angle. Also, what I wanted to add is that you don't have to just leave it at that. If you wanted to add a slightly more of a shine to it or something, you can create another donut here. I've created exactly the same shape again, and if I press on it now, you can see that it's slightly changed. It looks very different. That's how I made it here. A little bit more realistic, and what that is basically, it's another donut, but I have chosen to, let's go to fill again. I've chosen to lighten some of the other areas or darken some of the others, and I've decided to layer it over the original one I just showed you, and I've just chosen the opacity. I wanted difference, so if you see without, it looks like this, and with, it looks like that. And I chose difference, but you can choose all of these, make them hard mixed, give them different different colors, different yeah. So I mean, this is what worked for me. I used the difference one, so you can actually mix up different lights and choose to play around with how it will be, how opaque it will be, and the kind of light it will hit. So it's good to play around, get used to. See, there we go. If I pull it away, you can see that it's actually like a transparent layer, but it just adds that extra something. See, it just adds that extra something to the surface. So yeah, I suggest playing around as much as possible. You learn quicker. Going deeper into detail. Let me show you a part of the design that I thought was really important. Attention to detail, all that. Just like when I was showing you about the little shadows and lights that can make the difference between something looking a bit more realistic and not, is this glass. The glass that covers the watch face is cut at an angle, and this is reflecting some of the indices which are down here. And I thought that was really important to include it, as it's just something you wouldn't find on a more cartoony version of a watch. It's more detailed. So let me scoot over so you can see the watch face is here, round circle. The cutout bits, they are a separate layer and a separate shape. So going down even more simple, here you see I will get rid of those. So the watch face is here. What you want to do to create these bits is this. You're going to grab a watch face, I mean exactly the same size, just copy it, and you want to cut into it. First of all, I'm going to take the noise off of it, just so it's just plain black, and I'm going to go to color and make it just completely black. Alright, now we want to cut a little bit out of it, so I'm just going to create another circle now. So I'm going to duplicate that, Command C, Command V on a Mac, and I'll just change the color a little bit so you can see the difference. Okay, so here we have the grey one. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller like that, and I'm going to place it down here. So basically you just want to cut out around, you want to cut into the black one. We have the grey on top and black behind. So what we're going to do is over here on the layers, you see the grey one and the black one. You're going to select both of those, shift and then select both of those. And then up here, you're going to want to press subtract. We've pressed subtract, and now all we're left with is this round circle with a big hole in it. The indices you made earlier, indices are the minutes here. The ones we made earlier, you're going to want to go and get them. So I've got mine here. I'm going to change the color of the background so you can see it a little bit better. Here are the indices from earlier. So I've just copied these, and you're going to want to bring them over, and you're going to want to nest them within this shape with the hole in it. You're going to want to drag down and right to nest it inside. Now you see they're just in the shape. I've rasterized them. Don't worry about that. You don't need to do that, but I just did it from earlier. I don't know why. Now they're inside, you can play around with how much they're going to poke out. So if we go up here and see how much I've made them, okay, they poke out a little bit there. Yeah, that will do. Also note that they are a little bit more blurry. So I'm going to add a Gaussian blur to this. I'm going to go to the Effect tab, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to whack it up a little bit. There we go. So not going to be totally clear because it's being reflected in the glass somehow. I'm going to draw a circle again. That's going to be the watch face, if you remember from earlier. watch face we made, this grey one. So you're going to put that in the background. There it is. I'm just going to chuck it back in there so that you see the difference between the watch face and this glass. I'm going to make it slightly lighter. If we look up here, okay, it's slightly lighter here than the watch face. Let's make it a little bit darker. It's not that light. And that's how I got the edge of the glass. You can probably tell that I've done it twice, so I've done it here and then a little bit darker as it gets closer to this metal part here. You can do that just by redoing everything I've done here and just making it slightly darker and just layer them up. This is a really easy one. It's just a shape with lots of shapes in it again, just like pretty much everything else you make. So there's the crown of the watch. If I zoom in, I'll take it apart for you. It's got this little nib on it. That's just in the background. If I zoom into the nib, you can see what layers I've included. So basically it's a bunch of, I'll grab them out here. You can see here, it's just a bunch of shapes that I've just nested in this white shape. So this is the main nib, and then I've just literally nested all of them within here. So I'll just put it back together a bit willy-nilly. And so you can see they're all here, and I will just nest it back in there. Oops, forgot that one. That's pretty much what I'm doing. That's the nib. Let's get rid of that. The main crown. I'm going to take it apart for you. It's pretty much a square, and then I've just played around with one of the sides here. So if I go on to the node tool, you can see that if I press on that, literally it's just a square, and I've just played around with the nodes to give it more of a rounded edge. Within this shape, we have lots of different colors and shapes. So if I show you this bit here, these are kind of like the little teeth of the crown. If I take it out, this is something, another shape I made, and I just threw it on there, and try to make it look metallic with all these different shapes again. So you can see, look, there's one, just kind of layering up. Get rid of that, I'll delete it as I go. Here I've just made loads of rectangles, and you can see as I select them, just loads of rectangles going down. I've added a little Gaussian blur to them, as you can see on the side here. Little Gaussian blur there, see I can make it more or less. So initially they were just rectangles. As it's quite a small piece, no one's going to be zooming in that much because I'll only make it a certain size when people see it on a website or something. The way I have done it is to draw an outline of it and pretty much nest everything else inside. If you see I put that behind, you can see that it fills up any blank areas like down in this section here, because it's going to be kind of this color anyway. So that's what I've done, just to get the kind of to help me make the links all curve down in this kind of fashion, because it's going away from the camera, so to speak, into the background, so it gets smaller. So yeah, got that, and all these different little shapes. And to make them more metallic, I played around with them. I'll break one of them down for you. So if we zoom in, here's one. I will open it up and start playing around with it. I will drag all of these out so you can see what it's made up of. So the main shape is it's a square, really. If you wanted me to recreate this, I went over here to the rectangle tool and I drew a shape like that. I went to the fill gradient, and let's go from dark grey to white. and you can see here it goes white and then it goes a little bit grey again. So I'll double click here in the middle and I'll make that white, and then I'll make this bit grey. And to change the direction of the gradient, you want to go over here to the fill tool, press on that, and then there we go, you can drag it, oh, there you go, drag it up here. And you can see the white is a little bit more down, goes a little bit more further down. You can drag these in between the colours and push them out a little bit like that. And same for here. See, that's a little bit darker, the one I've done. Very easy to change. You can either do it from here or up here and play around with it on the colour here. So some of the other bits that I included, you see these rounded corners? Again, you can select just one rounded corner, and round it off like this. Or you can select all of them. So using the corner tool, I can just select all of them like that, and then go in like that. And that's it, they're all done. So what are the other colors and shapes I have in there? Well, to give it that metallic effect, you can see on the side like lights hitting it from the left, and it's creating a shadow on the right, and on the top there's a definite streak of light up there. And all this is purely nesting. So once you've got your main shape like this, here's the one I made just now, I can start grabbing these here, you can see it down here. You can start grabbing these and nesting them within the shape. So there it is, it's gone into this shape, so I just put it on the side. That's just a random shape I made. I included a Gaussian blur on it, and I did exactly the same thing with all of the rest of these shapes up here. So if we grab the big black one here, I'll nest that in also. There we go. And these ones, and you can keep nesting. I'll click all of these and nest them in there. So from afar, looks more realistic. That's one link, and you basically have to keep doing that to all of the links. Quite time consuming, but quite therapeutic as well, if you like art for that kind of thing. And I did exactly the same thing with here. You can see all these corners, edges. They're all just, if I drag that one out, yeah, they're all just shapes that I've created with the pen tool, and I've just gone around and done something similar to this. Chose a color for it, give it a Gaussian blur. I'm doing all this very quick so you can just see. Give it a Gaussian blur and then nesting it in to the main shape. And that's how I made the strap. So here's one of the indices at 12 o'clock. Let's grab it. Okay, there it is. So one thing to mention, if you want to make something bigger and smaller, and you want the, if you've included a stroke onto your object, in this case the stroke is the black outline. If you want to make it bigger and smaller and keep everything in proportion to how it's supposed to be, like this, just make sure that when you're over here on the stroke panel, you press scale with object. If that's not selected, look what happens. You can make it small, and you see it's gone really fat now. It's kind of different, and it changes. So if you press scale with object up here, if I make it really small now, it hasn't gone really fat. Something to keep in mind when you're making things bigger or smaller, if you have to. Okay, let's get on to how I made this. So this is actually two objects grouped together. So if you look here on my layers panel, I will ungroup them. Let me drag them out. The first one is the main shape, and then the second one is a stroke. To make the first one, it's pretty simple. It's another shape. So let's press on this one here, and we'll go to the triangle tool. There we go. Let's make a triangle. I want no stroke on this one, and I want to choose a color. So I'll go up to fill, and I'll choose a color. There, that will do. I also want to make this have shadows on the outside, so I'm just going to go the easy way and press effects down here, and I'm going to put inner shadow, and then I'm just going to up the radius. So that's that one done. Now I want to make sure that the points aren't pointy, so I'm going to go to the corner tool up here, and I'm going to select all of the 3 points, and then I'm going to go in a little bit like this. So now if we go closer, you can see they're not spiky anymore. Okay, that's the first shape done. Now let's make the same thing again. So I'll literally just I'll duplicate this one. Okay, I've duplicated that one. And instead of having any fill, we're going to get rid of that. So we press fill and none. We're going to press on stroke. I'm going to press on black. And you can change the size of the width of the stroke from here. Let's go about this much. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do, we're going to stick it over this shape here. Now you can see that it's the line of the stroke is in the middle here, and it's causing a pointiness to it, and I want it to go around this. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the stroke. If we go up here, and we're going to make sure the line is on the inside, so everything outside will be that black band. So I've pressed that. See, so it was like this before, and now it's going to be like that. So it's aligned outside. Okay, so I zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to stick it over there. There we go. So everything's nice and rounded in the corners. Now all I have to do is make it three-dimensional like this one. So we're going to make sure our stroke is the one selected. And let's go down to Effects, 3D, and turn the inner shadow off of this one because we just want 3D with the stroke. And we're going to choose a profile like that. That's the profile because it gives the edge. And I'm just going to put the radius out a bit more. Let's give it more of a shininess to it, shall we? I think it's from the direction it's making it more shiny. And let's change the color of the stroke, maybe make it a little bit lighter. There we go. So if I zoom in, now you can see we have those edges. The light's hitting it from the top. I'll group them together, the two shapes we've just made. So it's these two here. Let's put them on the top so it's more evident. Select both of them, and Command G will put them in a group. So now they're grouped like the ones we saw before. For those of you who want to see the outline view, there is a button right at the top, outline view mode, and here you can see all the shapes and how it was made. I know someone requested this on my Twitter a while back on a different design. Here it is. And that's it for this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, please press like and hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.